back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys! So I'm here today to review a 5-star book. This book is fantastic, it's essential reading. You should buy and read this book. It was mind-blowingly good. And the book I'm talking about is The Good Immigrant, which is edited by Nikesh Shukla, and it's a collection of 21 different essays from writers who are all immigrants to the UK. So every single person in this book has immigrated into the UK, or their family has immigrated into the UK and they are children of immigrants. So they definitely all have very strong ties to immigration into the UK specifically. I haven't read an awful lot of books about immigration, I must admit. It's something I want to read more of. I haven't yet. This book was my first exposure to particularly UK immigration, and I think because of that it was fantastic. It really resonated with me because I live in the UK. I've lived in the UK my whole life. This book challenged me as someone who is British, whatever that means, because I mean we were all immigrants once. I was challenged by this book so many times over to rethink things, to think deeper about things, to understand or try to understand the people's stories that I was reading about, and try to not to have my own stereotypes or prejudices which are always ingrained in your head in small ways, to try and put that all aside and just focus on what these people were telling me was their experience, and not to apply my own experience to it, because I haven't been through what they've been through, and I was encouraged and fascinated and astounded and dismayed by all of the stories in this collection. I put a lot of tabs in this. I have been tabbing a lot more recently, but this is the most tabbed book I've ever had. I ran out of rage tabs. These ones are the little ragey tabs that I have, and I ran out of them because I was so mad at so many of the things that were happening in this book that I couldn't believe that these were real people's experiences in England and Britain, and I was angry as can be, so angry that some of these people have been through this from British people. It made me so ragey. I was sent this one for review, and when I was contacted about it I said yes, please do send me it. It sounds amazing, but I don't think I realised just how personal and how raw this collection was going to get. Some of the stories in here are so raw, and they made me just feel like astounded by how open these people were being with their experiences and willing to talk about it and explain what it was like for them in sometimes really hard conditions, sometimes less so, but there were always challenges being faced. If you come into a culture that you're not used to and people are not used to you, there's going to be some friction there potentially for a lot of people, and obviously it's worse for some than others, but this collection really brought home to me how in the UK it happens. I tabbed every single story or essay in this collection with something, so I'm going to read some of the bits from some of the stories to you. So one of the earlier stories is called Namaste. It's by Nikesh Shukla, who is the editor. The first sentence is, Namaste means hello. It's a customary greeting and it's a respectful salutation. He goes on to talk about this problem he was having with people mocking the term namaste and using it in an incorrect way because culturally they don't understand what it means, and it's become something that's kind of cool for like yoga and peace and stuff, but culturally there's no understanding that's been translated into Britain of the real cultural impact of this word. Lies, I suppose, have been attached to this word, and he talks about it in the story of how it's basically cultural appropriation, where we steal something from somewhere else and make it our own, and he talks about that a lot. The next story is by Varadaizo, I think that might be how you say it, or Varadaizo, I'm not sure, and it's called A Guide to Being Black, and it's about having to teach yourself your culture when you are not brought up in the country that you were born in. You have to understand these things from media, from people around you, from friends who tell you things, and they're not always right if they haven't grown up in the country that you are ethnically from. So it was really interesting to read about the experience of the author trying to figure out themselves as a black person, fascinating, but also really sad that they had to do that. Another essay I really liked was Vera Chock's Yellow. Yellow talks about Chinese immigrants and how a lot of people who come from the Asian continent and countries that surround that or are grouped in the British definition of Asian are grouped together. People will assume you're Chinese or Japanese if you come from anywhere in that sort of area of the world and you live in Britain. British people will often just group you together and assume you're from this place. And the expectation for you to be from this place and know about it inside out and be able to tell funny stories is always there on your back. If you're an immigrant, you should know about your culture. Even if you were born in the UK and it's actually your family, your heritage that was from that place, it's often expected for you to be able to reel off facts and figures and cultural jokes and fun about your own culture, which is not always the case if you are someone who grew up in the UK. And even if you're not, it shouldn't really be like a party trick to just pull out of a hat. Another story was by Darren Chetty. It was called You Can't Say That, Stories Have to Be About White People. Darren Chetty is a school teacher who's teaching a school class of children. One of the children said, "You can't say that, stories have to be about white people," because in media, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, films, adverts, technology, TV shows, all those sorts of things you see on a regular basis are dominated by white people. That's just how it is in sort of Hollywood and in the UK, film industries, all that sort of stuff. Books will usually be dominated by white characters. It's rarer to see anyone of any ethnic diversity at all in any media that we consume. Of course, it's getting better, but it's got a long way to go. And so this story was all about this teacher couldn't understand that these children at such a young age already believed that there weren't representations of themselves out there in the world. And that just really hit me as something so horrible and nasty, not to have an idol to look up to who's of a similar race to you or has a similar upbringing or any of that stuff. I just there's so many moments that I feel like hit me really hard, and I feel like I can't do justice to this book because everything that resonated with me was only a tiny portion of how it must be for someone who's an immigrant reading this and nodding along, because so many of these things must apply to so many people. One of the stories that was probably my favourite in the collection was called Shade, and it's by Selena Godden, and I think alongside it being a really powerful story, it was actually really beautifully written as well. So I'm going to read you some of the sections from that one. Sometimes I think I'm about the same shade as Beyoncé, but it's hard to tell because it depends how much light they give to her. Some days I think I'm about the same shade as Rihanna, but that's also difficult to say as she switches shades too. Your shade is not skin deep. Your shade is not just about your heart and your soul. Your religion and spirituality, your elders and your history, your connection to a country, to geography and to a time and a place. Your shade is an industry. Your shade is a token. Shade is a passport. Shade is a cage and shade is a status. You tick other. The idea of ticking other, as a side note, if you have forms to fill out in the UK, it might be the same in the rest of the world, but if you have forms or something to fill out, like official documents to fill out for passports, things like that, registering for places, you get the option to tick what ethnic group you come from. So for me, I tick white British because that's what I am. However, there's always a box which is just other, and obviously a lot of people who are immigrants are not listed in the various categories. I think they only list about 3 or 4 categories, and if you don't class yourself as one of those categories, you just fall into other, whatever that may be, and this story is all about that. And I think a couple of the other stories also referenced how other is like an alienating term for people who are just not seen as part of Britain. Just what a horrible term. And I'd never thought about it because I'd never had to tick other, and that was just all my white privilege coming through, being like, God, I'd never even thought of that, but how alienating is that? It's horrible and not fair at all. This story continues to be beautiful, so I'll read you some more. My mother is the same shade as Oprah or Maya. Some summers I've seen my big brother almost as brown as Idris, but closer to Obama in the winter. Bob Marley was mixed, Jamaican and Celtic, same as me. His shade looks pale in some photos and sometimes much darker. You see, it all depends on the filter and the time of year. It all depends on the light, it all depends on the shade. It depends on what point people are trying to make to advertise things, to sell you things, to make money. That is the point, to get the shade right, to make shade the issue. To give shade, to put someone in the shade, to put someone in their place, to let someone know that they are less, more or less, because of their shade. Advertising companies, big corporations, banks and politicians need to maintain this to control the division of people through racism and shade, throwing shade of difference and indifference, good immigrant and bad immigrant, refugee and benefact scrounger. This keeps us in our place. Humans bickering, focusing on their differences, distracted and at each other's throats, competing and separating, divide and rule. News just in. What is the shade? Boko Haram black, entire village, over 80 people burnt to death in their homes. No, not newsworthy, not important. Bring back our girls. No, not today. Black Lives Matter. No, not today. Say her name. Not newsworthy. Terrorist bomb. Blood on European soil. Headline. Front page. The indifference is clear. The difference is clear as oil and gold. We must know the divide. Know your shade. Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? Whose shade are you on? Whose side are you on? None of us can ever unsee the violent images of immigrant children washed up on beaches and plastered over the front page of newspapers, or the ashy, broken babies trapped beneath rubble and bomb debris. How safe are the children? How safe is it for immigrant children in transit, all over the world, wherever they end up, whatever the shade of skin, refugee brown or immigrant brown? Who is protecting the kids from the predators, traffickers, from rape and murder? Do you mind me asking you a question? Where do you come from? You tick, other. And then I think this is my favourite and also the most horrible part of this story for me, although that section was pretty horrible too. I pull up a chair and I wait to be processed. I wait here whilst you print off your labels and consider me for your boxes marked black as in black black, or black as in brown black, or brown as in half black, or brown as in half caste. But hang on a minute. Surely if I'm from two colours, two races, I am two shades, and therefore not half caste, not half anything, but whole. I am double caste. But half sounds shadier. Half is best because half means less. You lose. You are half a person. We don't want you getting all empowered now, do we? Half caste, half breed. There's so much more I could read out of this book. I could literally sit here for hours just reading it out to you and reading out quotes. Particularly that story was my favourite, or that essay I should say, was my favourite in the collection. But there are so many really poignant things in this collection that I just never have had to think about, and that is definitely my privilege, and I want to change that. I want to think about things a bit more that maybe don't affect me, and I want to make sure I'm talking about issues like immigration, basic human rights, basic kindness. That's what I want, and that's what I feel like my country should give to people coming into it, whether they're immigrants or holiday people. It doesn't matter whether they're visiting or staying or whatever. I feel like personally everyone should be welcome to my country because I am welcome in other people's countries. Why can they not be welcome in mine? And I just don't understand the hate in the world right now. I know that's a big thing to say, but I don't get it, okay? And I particularly don't get it, and I don't like it being in my country, and I hate that because I am human, immigrants are human, we are all fucking human, and I don't understand why something as simple as skin colour or accent or anything should mean that you don't treat someone with basic human decency. So of course, as I mentioned at the very start of this video, I gave this 5 stars. I could literally read you quote after quote after quote, but I won't. I think that story, or the bits of it that I read, kind of give you an idea of what this is like, and I think you should just go and buy it, like, now. Thank you to Unbound for sending this to me as a review copy. It was the best book I've read this year. Simple. I mean, I know this year's only begun, but it's also probably the best book I've read in the last 6 months. Easily. So it's gonna definitely be on my top 10 of the year. It's fantastic. It's essential reading. You should read it right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.